After the engagement was broken, she walked away silently, until a duke arrived for her. The engagement that once promised happiness, security, and love had been shattered, and she had walked away without a single word of complaint. The candles flickered in the long corridors, casting shadows that seemed to follow her like memories she could not escape. Her heart ached, but she had learned long ago that sorrow was to be kept hidden. In Eldrin, emotions were often used as weapons. A broken engagement was a scandal not easily forgiven. The prince she had once been promised had shown his true nature, revealing a cruelty that Isolde could no longer ignore. Pride and self-preservation had guided her steps out of the castle, leaving behind whispers and stares that would follow her for years. Her journey had taken her to the highlands, to her family's ancient home, nestled among misty peaks and thick forests. It was a place steeped in old magic and secrets, a place where she could hide from the court's judgment. The manor was quiet, almost unnaturally so, with long corridors and windows that looked out onto a landscape touched by both beauty and melancholy. Here she could breathe. Here she could think. Yet even in the isolation of her ancestral home, she felt the stirrings of something she could not name. Shadows seemed to linger in corners where no light fell. Flowers that had long been dormant bloomed in the pale moonlight, petals glimmering as if touched by unseen hands. A portrait of her grandmother in the great hall seemed almost alive, the painted eyes moist with tears that had no reason to fall. Isolde could not tell if these things were signs of the supernatural or simply her own mind reacting to grief. Perhaps both. The highlands had always been whispered about in Eldrin tales of spirits, old curses, and power that lingered in the bloodlines. Now, those whispers felt real. She spent her days walking through the forests, gathering herbs and tending to the gardens, trying to find normalcy in a life that had suddenly become anything but. But the nights were the hardest. In the darkness, she felt watched. The wind whispered her name in voices that were not her own. Sometimes, she imagined figures standing just beyond the reach of torchlight, observing her with eyes that glowed like coals. One evening, as she sat by the window, the sky painted with the deep purples and blues of twilight, she noticed a black-feathered raven perched on the edge of the stone sill. Its eyes were sharp, almost intelligent, and it carried something in its beak. A letter, sealed with wax and marked with a crest she did not recognize, a duke's crest, not one belonging to Eldrin or her former betrothed. Her heart skipped a beat. Ravens were not unusual in the highlands, but this one carried a message, a summons, a warning, or perhaps something more dangerous. She hesitated, watching it with cautious curiosity. The bird seemed to regard her, tilting its head as if measuring her reaction. Slowly she reached out and took the letter. The wax was cold under her fingers, and as she broke the seal, she felt a shiver run through her body. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and commanding. It spoke of matters she did not fully understand: protection, danger, and the need to meet with the sender at once. A duke. The letter did not reveal much, only that he was arriving soon and that her life might depend on seeing him. Isolde's mind raced. Why would a duke seek her out? What could he know about her, about the broken engagement, about the whispers of curse and shadow that had begun to stir in her home? Her instincts told her to ignore it, to keep hiding in the highlands, away from power, away from danger. Yet another part of her, the part that had always been curious, bold, and unwilling to bow to fear, urged her to prepare, to face whatever was coming. Days passed, and with them came the growing sense of anticipation and dread. She noticed subtle changes in her surroundings. The shadows seemed deeper, almost alive, shifting when she moved. In the garden, plants leaned toward her, as if sensing her tension. Even the weather seemed aware. Sudden storms rolled over the mountains with no warning, and lightning illuminated the manor in sharp, dramatic flashes. Isolde could not sleep. Each night, she felt the presence of unseen eyes, following her movements through the corridors. Sometimes she heard the soft creak of floorboards when no one should be there. Once, she even caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching her through the mist. It vanished before she could approach. Then, one evening, as the sun sank low behind the jagged peaks, a carriage arrived. Its wheels clattered on the stone path leading to the manor, and the horse's hooves kicked up clouds of mist. Isolde felt her pulse quicken. She had been expecting something, yet the sight of the carriage brought a mixture of fear and curiosity that made her knees weak. The doors of the carriage opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an air of authority that made the air around him seem heavier. His hair was dark, almost black, and his eyes held a depth that made it feel as if he could see into the very soul of anyone who met his gaze. He wore fine clothes, but not in a way meant to impress. Instead, every detail suggested control, precision, and power. The Duke, Lucian. He approached her slowly, his movements deliberate. "Lady Isolde," he said, his voice smooth but strong, "I have come because time does not wait, and neither does danger." Isolde regarded him silently, unsure if she should feel fear, anger, or relief. She did not trust him, and yet she could not ignore the pull she felt, a sense that he had come for a reason beyond her understanding, that fate had guided him to her door. "I do not understand," she said quietly. "Why come to me? I am no one now, a lady abandoned." Lucian's eyes softened just for a moment. "No one is ever abandoned, Lady Isolde. Some things, though hidden, are always waiting. You are more than you know, more than the court ever allowed you to be. And there are forces that watch, that would harm you if left unchecked." She studied him carefully. There was something in his tone, a mix of warning and promise that made her heart race. Her instincts screamed caution, yet another part of her, the part that had felt lonely, betrayed, and silenced, felt a spark of hope, small but undeniable. "I do not seek your help," she whispered, though even she knew the words were fragile. "I want nothing to do with the politics or the power games of dukes and princes." Lucian inclined his head, acknowledging her words, but there was a firmness beneath the politeness. "I am not here for politics, Lady Isolde. I am here because the world is changing, and you are at the center of it. There are old magics, curses older than the crown itself, and they stir when broken vows are left unheeded. You have walked away from one promise, but another path opens before you if you are brave enough to take it." Her hands trembled as she held the letter he had sent. The weight of it seemed heavier now, full of unseen significance. She wanted to ask questions, many questions, but even the thought of speaking aloud, the fear that churned in her chest, made her voice falter. The night deepened, and the wind whistled through the trees surrounding the manor. Shadows moved in ways that felt deliberate, curling around the windows and doors, as if waiting. Isolde felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Lucian stepped closer but did not touch her. Instead, he extended a hand, not in command but in offer. "Walk with me, Lady Isolde," he said softly. "There is much to see, and the night will not wait." For a long moment she considered retreating into the manor, locking the doors, and pretending this encounter had never happened. But something deep inside her stirred, a sense of destiny, of purpose, of a life that had been waiting beyond grief and fear. Slowly, she nodded. "I will walk with you," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. As they stepped into the misty night together, the wind seemed to carry a warning and a promise. Shadows shifted, and the forest seemed to breathe. Isolde could not know what awaited her, danger, magic, or perhaps a path to understanding the power that had always lingered within her. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes watched, waiting to see which path she would choose. The night air was heavy with mist as Lady Isolde followed Duke Lucian down the winding path through the forest. The moon hung low, pale and fragile, casting silvery light on the trees, which seemed taller, darker, and more alive than she had ever seen. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made her heart beat faster. Lucian walked with a steady, confident stride, his cloak brushing against the damp grass. He spoke little, but every word he had said before carried weight, echoing in her mind. There was something about him, a mix of danger, command, and understanding. He seemed to know the forest as if it were a part of him, and his calm presence gave her both comfort and unease. "Are we far from home?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucian shook his head. "Not far, though the path is not meant for ordinary travelers. The forest watches, and it does not always forgive careless steps." Isolde glanced around nervously. The forest was alive in ways she could not fully explain. Shadows twisted unnaturally, shapes seemed to move just beyond her vision, and the faint sound of whispers drifted on the wind. She shivered, though not from the cold. "The forest watches?" she asked. Lucian's eyes, dark and penetrating, met hers. "Old magic lingers here. Some of it protective, some of it dangerous. You have stirred it simply by returning to your family home. Curses are delicate things. They notice when vows are broken and they react." Isolde swallowed hard. She had tried to forget about the broken engagement, tried to walk away quietly, but Lucian's words made her realize that perhaps some things could not be ignored. Not even in the Highlands, not even in her family's quiet, misty manor. They reached a small clearing where the moonlight fell fully, and for a moment Isolde could see the forest clearly. Then she noticed movement at the edge of the trees, a wolf. Its fur was dark as midnight, eyes glowing faintly, and it did not move like an ordinary wolf. It watched them silently, body tense, as if ready to strike or disappear into shadow at any moment. Lucian stopped and held up a hand. "Stay calm, do not make sudden moves." The wolf let out a low, guttural growl. Isolde felt her pulse jump. She had never been afraid of animals before, but there was something unnatural about this one. Something that seemed to belong more to the forest itself than to the world of men. Lucian stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "I am Lucian, Duke of Shadows. You will harm no one here." The wolf's ears twitched, and for a heartbeat Isolde feared it would attack. But then it lowered its body, still wary, and let out a soft whine. Lucian crouched slightly, extending a hand toward it. The wolf approached slowly, then pressed its head against his palm as if recognizing him. Isolde watched, astonished. It obeys you," she whispered. Lucian's gaze did not leave the wolf. "It trusts me because it knows my purpose. Some creatures of this world are bound by instinct, some by loyalty, and some by something older. You will understand in time." Isolde felt a mixture of fear and fascination. She had left the court to escape cruelty, lies, and power struggles. Yet now she found herself in the presence of a man who commanded forces she could barely imagine. And yet, despite the fear, there was a strange pull, an unspoken understanding between them, as if the shadows themselves had brought them together. They continued walking until they reached a small, hidden estate deep within the forest. The manor was covered in ivy, dark stone walls glowing faintly under the moonlight. Windows glimmered with a warm light, but the entire place exuded an aura of mystery, as though it were a living entity, aware of every movement and thought. Lucian opened the door and gestured for Isolde to enter. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of hallways and rooms filled with objects that seemed both beautiful and foreboding. Ancient books with gilded edges, portraits that appeared almost alive, and relics that glimmered faintly with enchantment decorated the walls. The air smelled of earth, old wood, and something faintly metallic, a scent that made her skin tingle. "Welcome to my home," Lucian said, his voice softer now. "Here you will be safe, for now." Isolde nodded, though unease still lingered. She could not shake the feeling that stepping into this place meant stepping into a world far larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. Lucian led her to a study where a fire burned in a tall, stone hearth. The flames cast flickering shadows on the walls, making the room seem alive. He gestured for her to sit in a chair near the fire while he moved to a large, ancient table covered in maps, scrolls, and curious objects. "Do you know why I came for you?" he asked without looking at her. She shook her head. "No. I only know that something dangerous is near me. That is why you came." Lucian finally looked at her, his gaze intense. "Partly, but it is more than danger. You have a power you do not yet understand, Lady Isolde. It is tied to your bloodline, to the house of Eldrin, and to the vows that were broken. The world you left is not idle. Forces stir in response to what happened, and you are at the center." Isolde felt a shiver run down her spine. "Power. I am no one important anymore. I left the court because I could not stand it. I do not want power, I want peace." Lucian's expression softened just a fraction. "Peace is not always given. Sometimes it must be claimed. You are stronger than you think. I will help you, but you must trust me." She hesitated, glancing at the fire. Shadows danced across the walls, and she felt the faintest sense that the manor itself was alive, watching, listening. Could she trust this man? Could she even trust herself? Yet deep down, she sensed that Lucian was not lying, that he understood the danger she faced in a way no one else could. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden noise, a soft, almost imperceptible rustling from the far corner of the room. Isolde froze. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Lucian did not move immediately. Then slowly he walked toward the sound, his eyes narrowing. A shadow shifted, and she realized it was not just the play of light. Something moved independently, like a creature of darkness. From the corner emerged a small, spectral figure. It had the shape of a child but shimmered and wavered like mist. Its eyes were bright and hollow, and its mouth opened, though no sound came out. Isolde felt a chill as it floated closer, and instinctively she took a step back. Lucian stepped forward, holding his hand out. "Stay calm. It is here because it senses the broken vow, the unrest. It is a guardian, neither friend nor foe, but it tests those it encounters. Do not fear it." The figure drifted closer to Isolde, its hollow eyes fixed on her. She could feel its gaze deep inside her chest, where the pain of the broken engagement still lingered. Her heart ached, but Lucian's presence steadied her. After a long moment, the figure tilted its head, as if studying her. Then, in a voice that echoed in her mind rather than the room, it spoke. "Only the one who truly claims your heart can save you or doom you forever." Isolde's breath caught. She looked at Lucian, whose expression had not changed, but his eyes held a deeper meaning now, a mixture of warning and something else she could not name. What does it mean?" she asked, voice trembling. Lucian's gaze softened, though the intensity remained. "It means that the path ahead is not just about safety or survival. It is about trust, understanding, and courage. The choices you make will determine not only your fate but the balance of forces that have waited centuries for this moment." Isolde sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. She had left the court to escape power, politics, and pain, yet here she was, drawn into a world she could barely understand. A world of shadows, old magic, and destiny. The night deepened around them, the fire flickering and casting moving shadows across the walls. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it whispers she could not decipher. She felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something she could not name, a pull toward Lucian, toward the path that awaited her. And she knew, deep in her heart, that her life would never be the same. The Duke of Shadows had arrived, and with him the night itself seemed to stir. Somewhere in the forest, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the choices she would make. The following morning, the forest outside Duke Lucian's estate lay shrouded in mist. Sunlight barely touched the ground, leaving the world gray and quiet. Lady Isolde stepped outside onto the stone terrace, inhaling the cold, damp air. Everything about this place was different from her old home in the Highlands. Here the shadows felt alive, moving like they had purpose and will. She shivered, not from cold, but from the sense that the manor, the forest, and even the Duke himself were connected in ways she could not yet understand. Lucian appeared at her side silently. His presence was steady, grounding her, yet she could not forget the power he held. Even in silence, he seemed to command the forest around them. Birds stilled, leaves barely rustled, and the wolf from the previous night padded softly near him, loyal as ever. "You did not sleep well," Lucian observed, his voice low and calm. I cannot sleep," Isolde admitted. "The house, the forest, it feels alive. And last night the spectral figure, it spoke to me. Its words," her voice faltered. "I do not understand what they mean." Lucian studied her, his dark eyes thoughtful. "It is not meant to be understood fully at first. Guardians of old magic do not reveal their meaning until the time is right. They test, they observe, and they sense. What it said is true. The choices you make and the heart you give will shape what comes next." Isolde swallowed hard, feeling both fear and curiosity tighten her chest. She wanted to ask more, but somehow she knew that pressing too hard could be dangerous. Lucian's calm presence made her want to trust him, though her instincts still screamed caution. He turned toward the forest and gestured. "Come. You must learn to control what stirs inside you. Your family's blood carries a power you have yet to see. It is tied to your emotions, to your choices, and yes, even to the broken vows of the past." Isolde followed him silently. The wolf padded alongside them, moving almost like a shadow of Lucian himself. They reached a small clearing, and here the mist seemed thicker, the air heavier. Lucian stopped, his gaze piercing. "Focus," he said. "Close your eyes. Feel the ground beneath you, the wind around you, the life of the forest. Do not fight it. Let it guide you." Isolde did as he instructed, though her heart pounded. She felt the damp earth under her feet, the cold brush of mist against her skin, and the subtle hum of the forest as if it were alive. Slowly, she sensed a warmth in her chest, an energy that she had never noticed before. It was faint, fragile, but undeniably hers. Lucian's voice guided her. "This is the start. Power cannot be controlled by force alone. It requires understanding, patience, and trust. Trust in yourself, in the magic of your blood, and in those who stand with you." She opened her eyes to find Lucian watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. It was not a look of desire, but of deep recognition, as if he understood the weight she carried, the fear she hid, and the courage she had yet to claim. Days passed in a rhythm of lessons and discovery. Lucian showed her how to feel the currents of energy in the forest, how to sense danger before it arrived, and how to call upon strength that had always been within her. Each lesson tested her patience, her fear, and her resolve. Yet as she learned, another presence began to trouble her, Prince Kalen. Rumors reached the estate, carried by whispers from the court. He had not forgotten her, nor the broken engagement, and his pride would not allow her absence to remain unchallenged. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned blood-red, a messenger arrived. His horse was tired, his clothes torn, and he carried a letter sealed with the royal crest. Isolde took it with trembling hands. "Do not open it here," Lucian said quietly, his hand brushing hers. "Some messages are traps. Some words carry more than meaning, they carry intent, energy. Wait until you are prepared." Isolde nodded, but the fear was palpable. Kalen's name alone brought back memories of betrayal, pride, and heartbreak. She had walked away quietly, yet it seemed he would not allow her peace. The next day, Lucian led her to the manor's library, a vast room with high ceilings and walls covered in shelves of ancient tomes. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny stars. Here he taught her about the history of Eldrin's magic, the curses that had lingered in the kingdom, and the guardians of old that moved unseen. "You see," Lucian said, pointing to a large, leather-bound book, "the world is full of forces beyond your knowledge. Some are protective, some are destructive, and some, like the spectral guardian you saw, are tests. They appear at moments of choice to show you the path you must take. You must be ready, or the consequences may be irreversible. Isolde absorbed every word, but her thoughts often wandered to the spectral figure and its warning. "Only the one who truly claims my heart can save me, or doom me forever," she murmured, the words tasting of mystery and fear. Lucian's gaze softened. "You do not need to understand everything at once, but know this: your heart, your choices, and your trust will shape more than your own fate. That is why I am here." The days turned into nights and their bond grew. It was not easy, for Isolde was wary, and Lucian's presence was as commanding as it was unsettling. Yet, in quiet moments, they shared stories of loss, of pain, and of regret. Isolde learned of Lucian's past, a family destroyed by betrayal, a childhood filled with shadows, and a long search for purpose. She felt a kinship in their shared experiences, even as the weight of magic, curses, and old promises pressed upon them both. One night, as the wind howled outside the manor and the firelight flickered across the walls, they were interrupted by a sudden noise. A shadow moved in the hallway, faster than any human could. The wolf growled, low and warning. Lucian stepped forward, his hand extended, and the shadow froze as if recognizing him. It was Prince Kalen. He had arrived at the estate, his expression hard, his eyes filled with fury and disbelief. "Isolde," he called, his voice echoing. "You cannot hide here. You cannot escape what is owed, what is promised." Isolde's chest tightened. The memories of betrayal, of humiliation, and of heartbreak surged forward. She wanted to flee, to retreat into the manor's hidden corners, but Lucian's hand on her shoulder steadied her. "You do not belong here," Lucian said calmly, though his eyes flashed with warning. "Leave, Kalen, before the consequences become your own." Kalen laughed, a sound sharp and bitter. "Consequences? I think you underestimate what is at stake, Duke. She is mine by right. The crown will not forgive her defiance." Lucian's gaze hardened, and energy seemed to hum around him, subtle yet powerful. The shadows in the room deepened, moving as if alive. Kalen faltered, sensing that the man before him was not ordinary. Isolde realized then that the world she had entered was far larger, more dangerous, and more intricate than she had ever imagined. The broken engagement, the spectral guardian, Lucian's mysterious power, all of it pointed to a fate she could not ignore. "Do you not see?" she whispered, turning to Kalen. "I am not the same woman you promised. I have chosen my path." Kalen's expression darkened. "You will regret this." He left as suddenly as he had arrived, but the tension he carried lingered in the manor like a storm cloud. Lucian turned to Isolde, his gaze softer now, but still intense. "You see what I warned you about," he said. "The court does not forgive, and those who seek power will not stop for morality or mercy. You must prepare yourself, for the next test will not be so easily avoided." Isolde felt a mixture of fear and determination. She was learning to wield her power, to trust in herself and in Lucian. But the world beyond the manor would not wait. Danger, magic, and old promises were moving in ways she could barely perceive. That night, as she lay in the guest room, sleep refused her. Shadows moved across the walls, whispering in voices that were half human, half wind. She thought of the spectral figure, of the words spoken. "Only the one who truly claims your heart can save you or doom you forever." And she knew, deep down, that the choice she would make, the trust she would give, the courage she would claim, would shape everything. The forest outside sighed with wind, the manor seemed to breathe, and the future waited in the mist. Tomorrow, everything would change. The storm had arrived without warning. Lightning split the sky over the highlands, illuminating the jagged peaks and casting long shadows across the forest. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the roof of Duke Lucian's manor, and the wind howled like a living creature. Lady Isolde stood at the window of the great hall, watching the chaos unfold, feeling it as much in her chest as outside. "The storm is not natural," Lucian said quietly, standing behind her. His dark cloak was damp, his hair plastered against his forehead, yet he looked more determined than ever. "It is tied to the curse, to the broken vow, and to the forces that have watched you since you returned to Eldrin. We cannot wait any longer." Isolde's heart pounded. She had spent weeks learning, training, and preparing, but the reality of confrontation made her tremble. "What will happen?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Lucian turned to her, his eyes steady and unwavering. "We face it together. The choice is yours, Isolde. Courage and heart will determine the outcome. Fear will not save you." The manor seemed to respond to his words. Shadows lengthened, twisting along the walls and floors, and a strange hum filled the air, like the whispers of thousands of unseen voices. Isolde felt a tingle of energy running through her fingers, the power within her bloodline awakening in response to the storm. They moved into the heart of the manor, a hidden chamber beneath the great hall, accessible only by a narrow spiral staircase. The walls here were lined with ancient stones, carved with runes that glimmered faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room lay a circular stone platform, etched with symbols she had only begun to understand. "This is where it ends or begins," Lucian said, his voice low and reverent. "The curse will manifest fully. The spectral guardian, the storm, the shadows, they are all tests. Only by facing them with clarity, trust, and courage can you succeed." Isolde nodded, gripping the edge of the platform as she felt the surge of energy in her chest. It was overwhelming, like a tide she could not control, yet something deep inside told her that she was ready, that she had always been ready, even when she had walked away from the engagement in silence. The shadows in the room deepened. From their edges, a figure began to emerge, the spectral guardian she had seen before. Its hollow eyes glowed, and it moved with a fluid grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. "You have come," the figure said, its voice echoing in the chamber and in her mind. "The choice is clear, courage and trust, or fear and loss. Only the one who truly claims your heart can save you or doom you forever." Isolde's pulse quickened. She looked at Lucian, whose hand rested lightly on the platform beside hers. The warmth of his presence steadied her, gave her strength. She realized with sudden clarity that she had already begun to trust him, not blindly, but with understanding. His power, his guidance, and his patience had prepared her for this moment. The guardian advanced, and the platform beneath her feet began to glow. Shadows spiraled, coiling around her and Lucian, threatening to swallow them entirely. Isolde felt fear clawing at her chest, but she remembered his words, "Fear will not save you." She closed her eyes and focused on the energy within her. The warmth in her chest expanded, spreading through her arms, her legs, her mind. The shadows hesitated, sensing her determination. The storm outside roared louder, lightning illuminating the chamber in brief, brilliant flashes. Lucian spoke softly, guiding her. "Channel it, Isolde. The power is yours. Feel it not as a weapon but as part of yourself. You are stronger than the curse. You are stronger than fear." She did as he instructed, drawing on the magic in the stones, the forest, and within herself. Energy pulsed through her, luminous and golden, pushing against the dark coils that threatened to consume the chamber. The guardian stopped, as if measuring her heart, her courage, her resolve. For a moment the chamber was silent, filled only with the rhythmic sound of her heartbeat and the distant roar of the storm. Then, in a burst of light, the shadows recoiled. The guardian stepped back, lowering its head, and the runes on the platform glowed brighter, responding to her strength. "You have chosen wisely," the guardian said. "Courage and heart will guide you. Trust has opened the path." Isolde exhaled, feeling both relief and exhilaration. The storm outside began to lose its fury, lightning retreating to distant peaks, wind softening to a whisper. The chamber was still alive with energy, but the oppressive darkness had lifted. Lucian reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if fate had always intended this connection. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with pride and something warmer, something that touched the deepest part of her heart. You chose yourself, your strength, and your courage. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear but from a sense of release, of redemption. She had walked away silently, carrying grief and betrayal, yet here she stood, unbroken, powerful, and free. Outside, the storm had ended entirely. Dawn broke over the highlands, casting golden light on the peaks, the forests, and the manor. Birds sang, and the air smelled of wet earth and renewal. It was as if the world itself recognized her triumph, acknowledging the courage it had taken to face shadows, magic, and fear. Yet even in victory, Isolde knew that life would not be simple. The court, the broken engagement, and the responsibilities of her bloodline would continue to demand attention. But for the first time, she understood that power, courage, and heart were tools she could wield, not chains to bind her. Lucian led her to the terrace, where the rising sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. He looked at her with a quiet intensity that made her heart flutter. "You faced the darkness and emerged stronger," he said. "Now, the world is yours to shape. And I am here as you chose, if you will have me." Isolde met his gaze, feeling the depth of his presence, the steadiness of his strength, and the quiet warmth that had grown between them over weeks of training, learning, and shared danger. She realized then that she had already given him something of her heart, not out of obligation but out of trust, understanding, and connection. "Yes," she said softly, a small smile forming on her lips. "I will have you, not because I need you but because I choose you. Because together, we are stronger." Lucian's hand found hers, squeezing gently, and the tension that had lingered in both of them over weeks of uncertainty and danger eased. They stood together, not just as allies, but as partners bound by trust, courage, and shared destiny. The manor, the forest, and the highlands around them seemed to settle, as if the world itself was breathing easier. The guardian had vanished, but its presence lingered as a reminder. Courage, trust, and heart would always guide those willing to wield them. Isolde turned back to the manor, thinking of the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the strength she had discovered within herself. The broken engagement, the betrayal, and the pain had not destroyed her. They had shaped her, forged her into someone capable of facing darkness, magic, and destiny itself. Lucian stepped beside her, and together they looked out over the forest and mountains. The future was uncertain, filled with responsibility, danger, and opportunity. Yet for the first time, Isolde felt ready. "Are you ready?" Lucian asked, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. She nodded, her heart full, her spirit unbroken. "Yes, we face it together." And in that moment, as sunlight bathed the highlands and shadows retreated into memory, Lady Isolde knew that life had offered her not just redemption, but the promise of a new beginning. A beginning defined not by fear, betrayal, or obligation, but by courage, trust, and the choice to embrace her heart and her power. The storm had passed. The curse was lifted, or perhaps transformed, no longer a chain but a reminder of strength. And in the quiet light of dawn, Duke Lucian and Lady Isolde stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future held together. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of hope, promise, and renewal. And in that whisper, Isolde heard her own voice, strong and clear. She had walked away silently once, but she had returned powerful, unbroken, and ready to claim her destiny.